Namaste. And now for the next exciting episode of Essence of Dharma. That's my radio voice. I can only do it first thing in the morning now because I don't smoke anymore. But anyway, sex should be sex, huh? Let sex be sex. The title of this comes from a saying, an aphorism, by Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff was an early 20th century Russian guru who had traveled to India and Tibet, evidently because he came in contact with the Sarmung Brotherhood, and they're Tibetan. So he had deep roots in Buddhist and Vedic culture. And he brought that information into the West, into Russia, which was really like part of Europe at that time. But he came from the Caucasus Mountains, which are in what is called Kazakhstan now, and had been a Vedic outpost for thousands of years. So he had a deep cultural background, and he had many interesting sayings. Like, why are people so hung up and confused and mixed up about sex? Well, another saying of Gurdjieff was, roses, roses. And that means you see a bush with some nice flowers, huh? And so you go into it and you find out, oops, it's covered with thorns. So the problem with sexuality, and why a lot of spiritual teachers want to observe celibacy and want their followers to observe it, is that sexuality seems all nice and wonderful, but all of the nonsense around it is not so wonderful at all. And why is that? Why is sexuality so problematic? It seems to just change and grow into this whole tree of problems and suffering. Why is that? Well, it's because we're so mixed up about it. We use the sex energy in all kinds of ways that it's not designed for. And to put it on a good technical footing, it has to do with the chakras. You all know the 7 chakras, right? Well, so the sex chakra, or I should say first, the chakras are not physical organs. They are organs of the pranamaya kosha, the pranic body, the energy body. Any good body worker knows this and is going to help you manipulate the energy body for optimal health. But what it means in terms of sexuality is that the sex energy should not mix with the energies of the other chakras. And that's what Gurdjieff meant. Let sex be sex. And it actually has a whole teaching behind this. Now, what happens when, for example, sex energy gets mixed up with the moving center? Well, then you see athleticism. Impossible, ridiculous physical efforts and compulsive sports playing and stuff like this. These champion athletes, some of these guys work out, they run themselves to death, like Jim Fix, the famous running teacher, literally ran himself to death. It's crazy. The overactivity. And then when the muscles and joints wear out because of all this hyperactivity, oh my God, it's a world of hurt. Look at Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's a good example. Big weightlifter, right? He had a quadruple bypass heart operation in his 50s. Why? Because of eating all this high protein food, a lot of meat, especially, and then working out really hard on top of that. It just wore out his heart. So these are the symptoms of someone with compulsive athleticism. But what happens when the sex energy gets mixed up with the heart chakra? Well, then we have romanticism, and excessive emotionality, sentimentality, the imagination of feeling all of these very complex emotions, which in English, actually, for most of them, we don't even have a word for. Sanskrit is much better than that. It has quite a large emotional vocabulary. But still, when emotion is taken to an extreme, when it becomes a compulsive obsession, then it's a perversion, actually, of the natural pleasure. And then, of course, when sex energy gets mixed up with the throat chakra, we have the demagogues, the people who like to scream and shout and speak endlessly about all kinds of nonsense. You should see the way I live. I do this 15-minute video in the morning, and I don't say anything the whole rest of the day. I like it that way. It's nice and quiet. Oh, maybe I'll chant some prayers. That's about it. But anyway, people who talk too much are mixing up their sex energy with the throat chakra. And then let's talk about the Ajna chakra. When the sex energy gets mixed up with the mind, with thinking, oh my God, what a mess. Then you have all of these crazy theories going out in all directions, speculation like mad. And of course, it always reaches a wrong conclusion because our thinking tends to be binary. Binary logic is always wrong because it goes to extremes. Everything is black and white. We've talked about this before. How Buddhist logic has 4 truth values and Jaina logic has 7. Right? So here we are stuck with poor old Aristotelian logic of 2 values, right and wrong, good and bad, black and white, and trying to think and speculate our way to enlightenment. Well, of course it's not going to work. And people with their sex energy getting mixed up with their mind go into all kinds of complicated arguments, completely unnecessary. The real truth is seen actually by getting rid of the mind. The mind is like a filter. Talk about rose-colored glasses. Well, the mind is like heavy-duty, dark sunglasses. It cuts out all the light. So when you get rid of the mind in meditation, then you can see the truth. So finally, when the sex energy meets the 1,000-petal lotus, now that's beautiful. That's ecstatic. That's real spiritual life. That's Brahman realization. It's very pleasurable. And there are no side effects other than thinking you're God, maybe, or something like that. But when the Shushumna, the central spinal channel, opens up, the Kundalini can rise and go directly. There's no need to mix up the sex energy with all these other chakras. And that's where people go astray on the path. For example, into mystical powers or into some kind of obsessive activity. Ramana Maharshi was famous for his attitude towards sex. He was like, look, I'm a jnani, I'm an avaduta. I don't get involved in all of this stuff. But if you do, just do it and get it over with. Don't think about it all the time. So he had a very pragmatic, down-to-earth attitude. I really like it. It's like, yeah, you want to come here and do meditation and stuff like that, that's cool, But keep your nonsense outside. Do it, get it over with, and then come. Don't come here and sit there and think about sex, because he knew what people were thinking. But we see it all the time in spiritual groups. The people who pretend to be celibate, but actually they got some action going behind the scenes, right? I don't know how this got started. Well, actually, I do know how it got started. This obsession with celibacy is that people want to be pure, or they want to be seen as enlightened. But guess what? An enlightened person is free to do whatever they want. They don't have to be celibate. And many of them, maybe even most of them, weren't celibate. That's why I said a spiritual teacher, like any ordinary person really, should have a right to privacy. They should have their personal life, and that should be distinct from their public life as a teacher. And there really are very good reasons for that. And the main one is that it's just none of your damn business. And to make it a public issue, that's not spiritual anymore. That's politics. Let's be honest about it. Of course, things like the child abuse happening in the Roman Catholic Church, this is actually going on in every spiritual organization to some degree or other. And in many, it got really out of hand. For example, in ISKCON, where there were swamis, so-called celibate sannyasis, having sex and selling drugs, all kinds of nasty stuff. So generally, the bigger the organization, the more of this behind-the-scenes problems there are. Why? Because for social reasons, they have to hide their sexual activities, right? I'm completely open about it. I have a sex life, and guess what? It's none of your business. But I don't promise to be celibate. I don't make promises that I can't keep at all. That's a general principle in my life. So I'm not going to promise to be celibate. I'm not going to promise to love you for the rest of my life, In Vedic days, when people got together for sex, they would have an affair maybe, a few days, and that was it. They went their separate ways. There was no marriage. I'm talking about Satya Yuga, way, way back in the Upanishadic days. There was no marriage. In fact, the scriptures say men were like bulls. When you have some cows and you want them to calve, you bring a bull, right? And the bull mixes with the cows for several days, and then you take the bull away when his work is done. So that's the way it should be. There shouldn't be this heavy attachment, There shouldn't be this big drama of relationships and all this stuff. Look at the newspaper. Look at these entertainers who their whole life is so public, including the nasty breakups and stuff that happen. Now, what's his name? Jeff Bezos is getting divorced, and all the dirt from his relationship is coming out on the news. It's disgusting. What's wrong with people? Well, what's wrong with people is that their sex energy is, first of all, suppressed. They've never had a complete and full experience of their own sexuality. So they tend to deny it to others as well. And if anyone is in a prominent position, if there's anything they can do to gossip and natter and bring them down, they'll do it. They're envious. Why? Because they're not satisfied, they're not happy. So I feel so fortunate that even though my relationships in life didn't work out because I'm a very unusual type of person, still I got to experience the height of sexuality because I insisted on it. I had to do it. I wanted to find out what it is. And here's the ironic thing, that when you experience the height of sexuality, you find it doesn't really make you happy. So here are all these people thinking that, oh yeah, when I finally get like a nice girlfriend or a nice boyfriend or whatever, and I get as much sex as I want, then I'll be happy. No. Then you're likely to land in a bunch of self-created problems because of attachment, obsession, identification, projection, and all these other psychological traits that people have around sex because they're running the sex energy through other centers. And that's not where it belongs. Sex energy is by nature very powerful. You know, it is like a race car. Here's a good example, a Formula One race car. You don't take your Formula One race car out on the street and drive down to the 7-Eleven. You don't use it to pull a trailer either. It's not a work vehicle. You don't take it out on the farm and use it to plow the field. No, it has one purpose, to go as fast as possible on a racetrack specially built for that kind of thing. So, in the same way, the sex energy is designed for one thing, to go for a certain peak of energy. And how and why and all how it works is actually a very detailed discussion, which I'm not going to go into because it's already been handled very nicely by Mantak Chia. Master Mantak Chia, Cultivating Female Sexual Energy, Cultivating Male Sexual Energy, his books. Look into them. They're very informative. They're very good. So let sex be sex. Just have sex, and then you don't need to have any opinions about it. You don't need to make it into a drama. You don't need to spin elaborate philosophies based on it, or crazy fantasies based on it, or talk about it all the time. You know? Like when this video is finished, that's it. I'm not going to talk about this anymore. I'm really tired of it, but it needs to be said and stated very clearly, even though I've mentioned it here and there in different videos. It needs to be stated in such a clear and open way that everybody can understand. Sex is so powerful, it can create new life. So how can that be separate from spirituality? Because spirituality is life. So when the prana, the sexual prana, arises, it can go in one of two directions. It can go towards an orgasm, a physical orgasm, or it can go to the top of the head for a spiritual orgasm, which we call enlightenment. And that's really the purpose of it. And that's the only purpose of it. It's not there to be an obsession or a craziness that people make it into. It's not supposed to be sublimated into power or hysterical emotions or demagoguery or over-intellectualism. That's not of its purpose. And when it is used, or rather misused for those purposes, it creates nothing but trouble. So this is something that you have to be aware of and live your life accordingly. Om Tat Sat. Om Harihi Om.